Pussy power, sexual market value, and the consequences of single parenthood. So when I say single parenthood, most of us are likely to think of single mothers specifically. I don't mean that. I think it's too narrow. The evidence suggests that two parents in the household, regardless of sex, gender, sexual orientation, race, educational level, social status, two parents are better than one, objectively. And if we're trying to improve society and improve the world and improve things for humanity generally, I think the focus needs to be on improving the rearing and raising of children. Overused phrase, children are the future. There's truth in that statement, though, obviously. We expire. So if we want to maximize the benefits for humanity now and in the future, we need to maximize the IQ, and we need to maximize the positive attributes of personality of children. So what are the consequences of single parenthood? Well, children who are raised in a single parent household are less likely to have aspirations for educational achievement. They're more likely to become delinquent from school or work. They're more likely to end up in jail. They're more likely to become single parents themselves. They're more likely to engage in criminal activity, specifically violent crime. They're more likely to have behavioral and emotional problems, psychological problems. They're more likely to engage in drug and alcohol use and to abuse drugs and alcohol. And they're more likely to become the targets of physical, verbal, and sexual abuse themselves. So, I don't know what's causing this. I think it might be a predatory male instinct that we haven't quite grown out of. But children who are in a home, typically with a single mother, where there is a man in the house who is not the biological father of the children, the risk that those children are the victim of sexual abuse is increased 30 times. And that's astounding. It's frightening, particularly in a society where the general consensus, and I know that's a loaded word, the general belief is that single parents are just fine. But the evidence is completely contrary to that belief. It's objectively better to have two parents, whether it's two men, two women, two both, two transitioning whatever. If you have two dads that love you, that's better than one parent, because the workload is more evenly distributed and resources can be focused on creating a positive, growing and learning environment for those children. The evidence is incontrovertible. So, there are plenty of arguments for why single motherhood is so prevalent, why single fatherhood is so prevalent, why divorce is so high. I believe the sum of those variables points to cultural influence as being the primary cause for single parenthood, and high divorce being the main driver of single parenthood. The number one reason for divorce in the United States is dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction. Number one reason cited for divorce in legal cases. Everybody's dissatisfied. What do you mean, dissatisfaction? What do you think living with another person is going to be like? That's beside the point. So, in the 1960s, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society rapidly and vastly expanded welfare and social programs in the United States. And to put a long story as short as I can, the state assumed the role of the father, where the typical exchange for most of human history, a woman exchanges eggs and fertility, and the man exchanges resources. That partnership so far has resulted in the most optimally prepared children for society, specifically Western society. So we got away from that in the 1960s. The rate of divorce rapidly increased along with women's liberation. And understand, I'm not making an argument against women's liberation. I think all humans, regardless of sex, gender, race, etc., should be able to do whatever it is that makes them feel fulfilled. I think our purpose is self-actualization. And when you reach the peak of that pyramid, you reach self-actualization, the benefits are fractal. The benefits spread from you at the epicenter of that idea. Self-actualization allows you to work for the benefit of others without being a detriment to yourself, a detriment to society, a detriment to those who surround you. So we figured out what seems statistically to be the best way to raise children, to have a breadwinner and I'll say nurturer, someone who manages the home and children and the rearing of children. And historically that's been male-female pair bonds. Is that to say that that's the best one? No, it's just the best so far, and it's what we have data for. We don't have much data for gay male couples, for example, who raise children. But inarguably, two parents are better than one. So that cultural shift where the state assumed the role of the father, assumed the role of the provider, created an incentive for single parenthood. Obviously, that's not the intended outcome, but people respond to incentives reliably. You can see this in laboratory studies of rats, rabbits, human beings. We respond to incentives. If I dangle the right bait out there, you're going to go for it. I'm going to go for it. That's just human nature. So we need to reevaluate our system of incentives and what we're incentivizing, because what we provide incentive for, we get more of. So if we're incentivizing single parenthood and divorce and broken homes, we're going to get more of that, inevitably. There's something to be said for the argument against welfare in that it exacerbates poverty, but I'm not going to get into that. So, pussy power and sexual market value. There's a disparity between men and women based on psychology and biology that is really inescapable. There are ways that we can mitigate the effects of those differences, and we should, to encourage equality between the sexes. I don't think anyone's making any arguments against that. There are plenty of people making arguments that there are no differences between men and women psychologically, biologically, and that there is no biological basis for gender expression, which, as far as I can tell, is an absurd assertion. It's close to 100% of biological females, biological males who assume the gender role and exhibit the gender expression of their biological sex. I believe it's less than 1% of people who are born female, for example, who identify as male and who express their gender as male, meaning engaging in typically male-oriented activities, dress, appearance, so on. So those differences cause disparities in society, disparity in the what I'll call the equitable distribution of resources. Men and women are programmed differently, and that sounds obvious to, I would imagine, most of you. It sounds obvious to me, but there is I'll call it an insurgence, another loaded word, of those radical ideas, radical egalitarianism. When you see in the Scandinavian countries where they are the most egalitarian, the differences are minimized as far as the environment men and women are placed in. The most egalitarian societies show the greatest disparity between the preferences of men and women. So you would think, based on the culture warrior mentality, that when you minimize societal differences in access, for example, that you would also minimize, say, looking at nursing. Nursing is a field that's dominated by females. You would expect in that line of thinking that when you minimized all of the societal differences and all of the differences in the way we raise children, that you would get a balancing of male and female representation in nursing. But it's not the case. In the Scandinavian countries, to use them as an example, the most egalitarian societies produce the greatest disparity. So you actually get more of a disparity in women and men in the nursing profession. You have a greater proportion of women than men than in less egalitarian societies like here in the West. So it doesn't appear that it's something societal. It's something that is in our DNA that determines to a great extent our personality, our preferences, and who we are as people. So we spend a lot of time trying to argue those differences away. So back to culture. We've incentivized single parenthood, and we've got to do something about that and fast, because it's changing the way we interact with each other. We're not seeing our parents enough. And what I believe caused that is, in order to tax more people, you have to get women into the workplace. How do you get women into the workplace? Well, you need to make things so expensive that one income earner can't support a family, and that way the person typically assuming the homemaker and child raiser role has to go to work. And then there's a need now for daycare, for public schools, for the state to assume the role of of child rearer. The state becomes the person who raises your children, while the parents become the primary breadwinners. Or in the case of a single parent household, both the state and the parent are breadwinners, and the parent is doing about half of the child rearing, and the state is doing half the child rearing. So it's obvious to see how easy it is to indoctrinate children into the idea that the state is a provider and a good guy, so to speak. So what is sexual market value, and how does it affect that dynamic? Sexual market value is the price that people are willing to pay for your sex, basically. So A man's sexual market value is based on his ability to acquire resources, namely money in the West. And a woman's sexual market value is based on fertility. And there are plenty of aspects of fertility. So appearance, hip to waist ratio, the size of breasts, physical beauty, fertility meaning eggs and reproductive fitness. And men are also evaluated in those ways. So women are looking for men typically who are taller than them, as intelligent or more intelligent than they are, who earn more money than they do. So women are hypergamous, which means they select across and up dominance hierarchies. So they're looking for, let's say a woman is a 7, she's looking for a 7 or above. 8s will do, 9s will do, 10s will do. So when does your sexual market value peak? For women, it's at about age 22. You can imagine a 22-year-old woman is more beautiful than she ever will be, and more beautiful than she ever has been. She's also reproductively fit. She has a good deal of eggs left, and barring some complication. She's physically attractive, has likely accumulated some resources, meaning education, job skills, home skills, the ability to balance a checkbook, for example. So all of those skills enhance her sexual market value, in addition to her reproductive fitness. The exchange is eggs for gold, so to speak. So there's a rapid increase from menses to peak sexual market value. Peak sexual market value at 22, and then a rapid decrease in sexual market value through late 30s. So at the age of 30, there's an intersection. So female sexual market value starts out rapidly climbing, peaks at 22, while a man's sexual market value effectively starts at 0 at puberty and slowly increases. So at 30, women are over that hump at 22. At 30 years old, there's an intersection between male sexual market value and female sexual market value. The male is increasing in value and the female is decreasing in value. And understand, I'm not saying the person is decreasing in value, specifically sexual market value. What price your sex can demand. And you can think of it in terms of expense. A 22-year-old woman is going to be more expensive than a 35-year-old woman. A 38-year-old man is going to be more expensive than a 22-year-old man. So a man's sexual market value is primarily determined by his ability to acquire resources. So his salary, his occupation, his social status. There are physical characteristics as well, hip to shoulder ratios, facial symmetry, jawline, muscle mass. Height is a big one for female hypergamous selection. So we evaluate each other the same way. And I think most people could say, well, I'm a 7. Everyone knows the 1 to 10 scale. I think I'm about a 7. And that's an honest answer for me. So you know where you fit in this hierarchy, and you know where others fit, particularly if you're interested in sexual pursuits. It's easy to evaluate other people. Am I saying that's right? No. I mean, I don't think it's a judgment call. You're looking for reproductive fitness, and you're looking for the characteristics that you find valuable. When you construct the ideal mate, the archetypal partner, you, if you're honest in that assessment, there's a very clear picture of what that person looks like, what they sound like, maybe smell like, what their personality is like. You create a hero archetype for your ideal mate. So I've been listening to these call-in shows, and they're mostly focused on psychology and philosophy, and I've noticed a lot of female callers who are tens. They are highly successful. They are income earners in the top 5%, let's say. They're typically physically attractive, no children. They're essentially what in the 1950s a woman would have been looking for in a man. So they've assumed what has historically been a male gender role. And in order to get to that position, they've sacrificed youth, fertility, and physical beauty. So if you peak at 22 and you decide to, let's say, the caller, for example, that I listened to, chose to pursue a PhD and then was interested in going to medical school. And I believe she was 31. So the clock is ticking down at that point as far as fertility. And she's in the top 1% of the sexual market. She's beautiful, successful. I think she was reasonably tall, 5'6", 5'7". So if females are hypergamous, they're looking, like I said, across and up those dominance hierarchies. So she's looking for a man who is in the top 1% of the top 1% of sexual market value. And those men are likely to be in their late 30s. Statistically, 38 years old is the peak of sexual market value. So is a 38-year-old man who is successful, let's say he's attractive, and he's interested in starting a family, is he looking for a 32-year-old woman, let's say? Well, some are, but most are not. Most are looking for women closer to their peak of sexual market value at 22. So the 10 and the 10, from your perspective, the woman is here at 22 years of age, the man is here at 38 years of age. Those caps, the intersections here at 30, these two are looking for each other, the 10 and the 10. The 22-year-old female 10, the 38-year-old male 10. The people in the middle are making compromises up and down those dominance hierarchies to find the ideal partner. So to condense this, those women who have pursued careers and sacrificed youth and fertility end up scrambling in their mid to late 30s to find a mate. And the mates they're looking for, the alpha, successful, attractive man, that man is not looking for them. That man is looking for someone much younger and fertile, if he is family-minded. So we need to figure out what our long-term strategic goals are. And I want to link this back to the beginning and to sexual market value. Pussy is expensive. And people are willing to pay a lot for it. It demands a high price. So your long-term strategic goals are going to dictate what moves you make, and you can evaluate those moves based on whether they're in alignment with your trajectory toward that long-term strategic goal. If your strategic goal is to have a family, women need to be focused on doing that at around 22 years of age, when they can demand the best possible man. And men need to be doing that at 38 years of age, when they can demand the best possible female. So our society is driving us toward a career focus, a consumption focus, a materialistic culture, with the state assuming the role of the parent and the provider. The state is assuming both roles, the mother and the father. And that's a problem for society. That's a problem for long-term success and a problem for long-term outcomes, as I discussed with the difference in outcomes for children who are the product of single versus two-parent households. So this is something we need to fix. We can't do anything about the sexual market value, but what we can do is maximize the value of those individuals through proper child rearing. And proper child rearing starts with a stable household, a predictable daily routine, and two parents. Sorry, this isn't a judgment call saying that single parents are bad. Men choose bad partners, women choose bad partners, and often that leads to divorce, particularly in the West. We're a divorce-crazy society, and dissatisfaction to me does not seem like a reason to sacrifice the future of humanity. I hope that information helps. I hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, I'll see ya.